The town of Dry Hollow was as unkind as the sun that scorched it. Built of sun-baked wood and dust, it clung to the edge of the desert like a secret no one wanted to remember. Folks here didn't take kindly to strangers, especially not the kind who had nothing to offer but hunger and silence. Clara was that kind. She had arrived the night before, dragging her blistered feet along the cracked earth, her shawl more holes than cloth, her face hidden beneath the grime of too many miles and not enough water. No one noticed her at first, but by morning, as she sat on the edge of the trading post steps, clutching her stomach and whispering prayers to no one, they all saw her. And they judged her. "She smells like the grave," muttered one rancher. "Likely mad," hissed the butcher's wife. "She'll steal if we ain't watchin'," barked the storekeeper as he slammed the door shut. No one offered her food. No one asked her name. Clara didn't blame them. She wouldn't have trusted herself either. Life had chipped away at her until there was barely anything left. A woman alone in the world without kin, coin, or a cause had two choices: disappear or beg. She'd done both. That morning, though, she stayed visible. Sat there on the steps of the post like a wounded bird, broken but too stubborn to move. Her eyes burned from the sun and shame, but she kept them open. And because of that, she saw him. He stood by the horse trough, silent, tall as a pine and still as stone. Apache, unmistakably. His long black hair was tied back in a warrior's braid. His face marked with years of both peace and war. He wore buckskin, hand-stitched and powerful. But it was his eyes, dark, steady, and unreadable, that made Clara hold her breath. Most white folks would have run or stared. But this man wasn't like the others who passed through town for trade. He watched her not with suspicion, but with something else. Interest, pity? No. Purpose. He approached without a word. The townsfolk froze. One woman pulled her child back into the general store, but the man paid them no mind. His shadow fell over Clara as she looked up, startled. "Have you eaten?" he asked, voice low and deep as canyon stone. Clara blinked. She hadn't heard her own name spoken in days, and here this man was offering food like it was nothing. She opened her mouth but found no words, just a dry, croaking sound that made her wince. He didn't flinch. He held out a leather pouch, offering dried meat and water. She took it slowly, half expecting it to be a cruel trick. But it wasn't. The food was real. Her hand shook as she bit into it, lips trembling. He sat beside her on the step, not too close, not too far. The people stared, murmuring. The storekeeper cursed under his breath. But the Apache ignored them. Only after several long minutes did he speak again. "You're alone." It wasn't a question. She nodded. He said, "So am I." She looked at him sideways, confused. A man like him, strong, respected, clearly feared, how could he be alone? "I have no heir," he added. "No wife, no son. My people wait." "But I wait longer," she swallowed, unsure if she understood. He looked her in the eye and said, "You're alone. I'm childless. Let's fix that together." Clara nearly choked on the last bite. Surely he was joking, or mad or dangerous, but his expression never changed. Not cruel, not desperate, just honest, steady, as if he'd already made peace with his choice. Clara looked down at her hands, dirty, small and trembling. She had once been a daughter, a wife, almost a mother. That was before the world took everything. And now here she sat, asked to be, what? A bride? A mother? To an Apache warrior she just met? "I don't even know your name," she whispered. "Lone Bear," he said, "a name of strength. A name meant to survive." She gave no name in return. Not yet. She hadn't decided if she was still that woman. Lone Bear stood, then extended his hand. He didn't force her to take it. Just waited. Clara looked at the townsfolk glaring at them, then back at the hand that could lift her from the dust or crush her if he wanted. She reached up slowly and took it, and just like that, Clara wasn't invisible anymore. She was chosen. Ride out of town was slow and quiet. Clara didn't ask where they were going. She didn't have the strength to care, not yet. Her body, weak from hunger and days of walking, sagged in the saddle behind Lone Bear. His horse was massive and calm, as if used to carrying more than one burden at a time. The town disappeared behind them, just another place that didn't want her. But this time, she wasn't walking away alone. She didn't know why she'd said yes. She didn't even know what she'd agreed to. Marriage? Adoption? A deal? It didn't make sense, yet something in his eyes had made her believe it wasn't. A tricked out by sundown, they stopped beside a creek where Lone Bear helped her down and motioned for her to sit. Clara's legs nearly gave out, and she collapsed into the grass, panting. The air smelled like wet earth and cedar. It was the first breath she'd taken in weeks that didn't taste like dust or despair. Lone Bear knelt by the water and began pulling supplies from his saddlebag: dried bison meat, wild herbs, hard bread, and a tin cup for water. He moved with quiet purpose, offering her food without fanfare or fuss. She ate slowly, chewing each bite like it might vanish if she rushed. "You don't talk much," she finally said, wiping her mouth. "I speak when there is need," he replied. "You think there's need now?" He met her eyes. Yes, he didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. His stare told her everything. "You matter. I'm watching. I'm waiting. I don't understand you," Clara admitted. "Why would a man like you offer something like this to a woman like me?" He stirred the fire. "You're strong. Most women would have died out there. I might still. Not if you stay with me." She looked at him, uncertain whether he meant protection, purpose, or something else. "Entirely. You said you needed an heir," she said. "But you could have any woman you want." "Not any," he said plainly. "Many women want my land, my name, my blood. But they do not understand hardship. They do not understand silence. You do." She didn't know whether to be flattered or offended. "So you want me to give you a child?" "I want a partner," he said firmly. "A woman strong enough to raise one. A woman who does not break." Clara laughed, but there was no joy in it. "I'm already broken." "No," Lone Bear said. "You bent, but you're still standing." Something caught in her throat. She turned away and stared at the creek, blinking fast. She wanted to run. She wanted to stay. She wanted to scream and sleep at the same time. "Why now?" she asked. "Why me?" He said nothing for a long time. Then finally he answered, "Because I've waited long enough. And I've seen enough people to know." "When someone's spirit matches mine," Clara snorted. "You think we're alike?" "Yes, you're wrong." He leaned forward, his voice still low. "You've lost. So have I. You've wandered. So have I, but you kept moving. That matters." Clara bit her lip. Her eyes stung, but she wouldn't let him see tears. "I had a child once," she whispered. "Didn't live long. Fever took him. The man who got me pregnant left a week later. Called me cursed. Maybe I am." Lone Bear's expression didn't change. He simply nodded. "My wife died in childbirth," he said. "So did the baby. My people said it was bad medicine. But I didn't believe that. I believed life is cruel, and fate doesn't care who it touches." She looked at him again. For the first time, she saw the hollow pain behind his stoic face. "Do you want love?" she asked quietly. "I want truth," he answered. "Love comes later." That silenced her. The fire crackled between them. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of smoke and pine. Lone Bear reached into his pouch and pulled out a leather cord strung with turquoise and bone, a simple necklace. He laid it on the ground between them. "If you take this," he said, "you'll ride with me tomorrow to my people. I'll speak your name before them. They'll call you wife. And if I don't, I'll ride alone, and you'll walk to the next town. They won't be kinder." She stared at the necklace. It wasn't just a proposal. It was a lifeline, a risk, a door. She reached out slowly and picked it up. Clara awoke before the sun rose, wrapped in a thin wool blanket Lone Bear had given her. The fire had gone to embers. For a moment, she wondered if she dreamed the whole thing, the offer, the food, the necklace now tied around her throat. But when she turned her head, Lone Bear was already saddling the horse, quiet and steady, like the night hadn't touched him at all. She sat up slowly, every bone aching from weeks of wandering. But something inside her felt different. Not healed. Not yet, but anchored. "You sure you still want me to come?" she asked, half expecting him to have changed his mind. Lone Bear didn't look up. "You chose. I do not unchoose." The words struck her harder than she expected. She wasn't used to being wanted without question, without suspicion. Her past had always followed her like smoke, filling every room, poisoning every chance. But Lone Bear didn't ask about her sins. He seemed to accept that they existed, and that was enough. They rode in silence for most of the day, crossing wild terrain where the land breathed differently than the towns Clara knew. The trees were older here, the air cooler. She watched eagles circle high above and wondered what it would feel like to belong to the sky instead of the dirt. From time to time, Lone Bear looked back to make sure she was still seated firmly behind him. His body radiated heat and strength, and Clara found herself relaxing against his back, trusting him in ways she didn't understand yet. "Where are we going?" she finally asked. "To the canyon," he said, "where my people wait. And they'll just accept me? A dirty, pale stranger with no family and no name? They'll see what I see," she scoffed. "And what's that?" "A woman who knows how to survive." The road narrowed through a rocky pass. A hawk cried overhead. Clara shifted uncomfortably. In the saddle, her legs ached, her heart doubted. But Lone Bear's words clung to her like armor. By late afternoon, they reached a high ridge. Below it, nestled in a bowl of red rock and green forest, lay a hidden Apache settlement. Smoke rose in thin ribbons from clay lodges. Children ran like deer between the trees. Horses grazed near a shallow stream. Clara gasped. It was nothing like she expected. No war paint. No drums, no threats. Just life, real, breathing life. Lone Bear paused on the ridge, letting her take it in. "This is where I live, where I lead, where I bury the past and build what comes next." Clara blinked at the sight. "It's beautiful." He nodded, then glanced over his shoulder. "So are you. When you stop looking down." Her eyes flickered away, embarrassed. As they descended into the canyon, people began to notice them. Some stared, some whispered. A few of the children ran to greet them, laughing and calling to Lone Bear in their native tongue. He spoke back calmly, dismounted, and helped Clara off the horse. She landed awkwardly, her legs nearly giving out. Lone Bear caught her arm gently. "Walk proud," he murmured. She tried. She really did. A group of elders approached. Among them, a gray-haired woman with sharp eyes and a necklace heavier than Clara's entire pack. Lone Bear bowed his head slightly and spoke in Apache, explaining Clara's presence. His voice was steady, unapologetic. The woman looked Clara up and down. Then she stepped forward and, to Clara's surprise, took her hand. She squeezed it once and nodded. Clara almost cried right there. They didn't shove her aside. They didn't mock her clothes or her smell. They simply welcomed her. Later, Lone Bear led her to a small lodge made of clay, woven with branches and painted with symbols she didn't recognize. Inside was simple: 2 mats, a fire pit, folded, blankets, and herbs hanging from the ceiling. "This is yours," he said. "Ours?" He hesitated. "When you're ready." "I sleep outside until then." Clara turned to him. "You don't have to do that." "I do," he said. "Respect isn't spoken, it's lived." She sat on the mat, overwhelmed. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like a stray animal trying to survive another day. She felt like a woman being given a chance to become something more than what the world left behind. The lodge was quiet, and Clara couldn't sleep. Outside, the crickets sang and the fire crackled softly. Lone Bear had kept his word. He slept outside, just beyond the flap of the lodge, like a sentry. The night air was cool, the bedding soft, but her body still felt like it carried the weight of every year she'd spent scraping by. And her mind refused to rest. Clara had never imagined she'd be in a place like this. A hidden world where people didn't spit at her or shout slurs when she passed. No man here had tried to touch her. No woman had told her to keep walking. Still, peace like this made her uneasy. She wasn't used to safety. Safety meant quiet. And quiet let the memories in. She curled tighter on the mat and closed her eyes. But the past came anyway. Cold room in an abandoned mining shack. The sound of a baby's whimper slowly fading into silence. Her screams going unanswered. Her hands covered in blood, trying to save something already lost. Then came the man, the father. The one who'd left the moment he saw the child wasn't breathing. "You're cursed," he'd spat. "I knew it. You kill everything you touch." Those words had stuck like a thorn in her soul. She'd buried the baby in the hills with her own 2 hands. No marker, no name, no prayers. Just dirt and grief. Clara opened her eyes and sat up in the dark. Her fingers trembled. She reached for the necklace Lone Bear had given her. The turquoise felt warm against her skin, even though everything else felt cold. Why had she agreed to this? Why had she let a stranger take her in and treat her like she wasn't broken? The flap of the lodge rustled slightly, and she turned. Bear didn't enter. He only called softly, "Are you awake?" She hesitated. "Yes, you are crying." She wiped her face. "I didn't mean to." "You don't have to hide it." She wanted to scream at him. Why not? Everyone else always made me. But she didn't. She just sat still, watching the firelight flicker across the clay walls. "Do you want to talk?" he asked. "I don't know how." "That's fine," he said. "Then sit. And be quiet, but don't be alone." A moment later, his shadow disappeared. Clara rose, stepped outside, and found him sitting near the fire. He didn't look at her, but he shifted enough to make space beside him. She sat. For a long time. They didn't speak. Finally, she whispered, "I lost a child." Lone Bear didn't flinch. "I was 18. The man who got me pregnant left before the baby was born. I gave birth in an abandoned shack. There was no help, no food. He lived a few hours. I held him until he stopped breathing. I named him Daniel." The name came out raw, like she hadn't said it aloud in years. "I buried him myself," she continued, voice cracking. "Then I ran. And kept running. And every place I went, someone reminded me I wasn't worth keeping." "Still," Lone Bear said. "Nothing. No pity. No shock, just steady listening." "I don't know how to be a wife," she said. "I don't even know if I can be a mother again." Lone Bear finally turned to her. "My mother buried 4 children before me," he said softly. "She said grief is a spirit that follows a woman until she learns its name." Clara looked at him. "What's its name?" "Love," he said, "still alive." The fire popped, and Clara felt something inside her loosen. "You think I can be whole again?" "No," he said. "I think you already are. But the world told you otherwise." Tears spilled down her cheeks again, but this time she didn't wipe them. Lone Bear reached into his pouch and pulled out a smooth, carved stone. He handed it to her. "This belonged to my son. He never held it. You keep it now." I can't." "You can," he said, "because pain is not just yours anymore. It's ours." She held the stone close to her heart. And for the first time in years, Clara didn't feel like she was drowning in sorrow. She felt like she was healing in it. The days passed slowly, marked by morning mists, birdsong, and the rustle of leaves in the canyon. Clara woke each dawn to the sound of fire being stoked and the aroma of cooking meat and herbs. Lone Bear never came inside the lodge unless invited, but his presence was always near carving wood beneath the trees, tending the horses, trading quietly with the others. Clara noticed something strange. The people treated her with respect, but with a quiet caution too, like they were waiting for something. Not suspicion, more like curiosity mixed with reverence. They didn't press her with questions, but they watched, and Lone Bear, he watched too. He showed her how to fetch water from the stream, how to gather wild onions, how to grind seeds with stone. He never forced her to speak, but when she did, he listened so completely it unnerved her. One afternoon, she found him, sitting beneath a cottonwood tree, sharpening a long, curved knife. Sunlight dappled his face. She approached slowly, unsure whether to disturb him. He looked up without surprise. "Sit." She obeyed. After a long silence, she asked, "They all follow you, don't they?" He paused the blade's motion. "I lead them. But they don't treat you like a chief. Not like the stories." He half smiled. "Our ways are not stories. Strength isn't shouted here. It's proven quietly." She nodded, then hesitated. "Do they know what happened to your wife and child?" "Yes." "And they still follow?" He set the knife down gently and looked at her, his gaze calm but deep. "They follow because I lived when I wanted to die, because I buried my grief and still chose to lead. But not everyone agreed with my choice." She turned toward him. "They blamed you?" They blamed her. She was from another tribe. They said it was bad luck, that my marrying her cursed the birth. Clara's throat tightened. "They said I should take another wife," he continued, "that I should try again, but I waited for years." "Why?" He picked up a stick and drew a line in the dirt. "Because grief is sacred. You do not replace the dead, you carry them." She swallowed hard. "And now?" He looked at her with a quiet intensity that made her heart race. "I still carry them," he said, "but I'm no longer meant to walk alone." Clara didn't know what to say. Her hand drifted to the small carved stone he'd given her, his son's. It hung on a cord around her neck now, just beneath the necklace he'd offered her that first night. Sometimes it felt heavy. Sometimes it gave her strength. "You don't seem afraid," she said softly, "of me, of what I bring." He smiled faintly. "I am a warrior. I've fought wolves and men. But a woman's pain, that is the fiercest thing I've ever faced. Because it never ends?" "No," he said. "Because it doesn't have to." Clara blinked, unsure what he meant. "You think your past is a wound," he said, "but it is not. It is a scar. It has already healed. You only need to stop picking it open." She looked down at her hand, still rough, still trembling when she let herself remember too much. "I don't know if I can bear children again," she admitted. "Not just in the body, in the soul." "I know," he said. "You still want me?" He nodded. "Because I am not looking for a womb. I am looking for a woman. And you are her." A breeze stirred the trees, and Clara closed her eyes. For years, she had begged for crumbs of food, of kindness, of meaning. But this man, this quiet giant of a warrior, gave her something else entirely. He gave her the right to be more than her suffering. She opened her eyes. "I want to know more about her, your first wife, if you'll tell me." He didn't answer right away, but then he began to speak softly, reverently, about a woman with laughter like wind chimes who loved. The stars, who braided his hair with feathers and sang to their unborn child Dot as he spoke. Clara didn't feel jealous or unsure. She felt honored Dot because in that moment she realized he wasn't trying to erase the past. He was asking her to be part of it and to help write what came next. Clara stood in front of the mirror-polished river, her reflection broken slightly by the current. She barely recognized the woman staring back. Her hair was clean, combed, and braided down her back. The dirt that had once masked her skin was gone, revealing pale cheeks now pink from sun and healing. Around her neck hung the turquoise necklace from Lone Bear and the small carved stone of his lost child. Her old rags were gone, replaced with the simple but beautiful deerskin dress gifted by the village women. But it wasn't the clothes or the hair that made her unrecognizable. It was the way she stood tall, not like someone expecting to be cast out. Behind her, Lone Bear approached quietly. He never startled her. Somehow, she always knew when he was near. "They are ready," he said. She turned nervous. "I'm not sure I am." He studied her for a moment, then said, "Then we'll wait." Clara gave a tight laugh. "You'd wait another year?" "Yes." "But your people, my people follow me," he interrupted gently. "Not because I force them, but because I honor them. And I will honor you." Her heart swelled with a mix of dread and gratitude. "You know I'm not used to being treated like this." He stepped forward, offering his hand, not grabbing, not pushing. "Then let this be the first day," he said. "You stop expecting the worst." She slipped her hand into his, warm, solid. And together they walked. The gathering was held beneath a large sycamore, its leaves dancing in the breeze. Elders sat in a wide circle while women, children, and warriors lined the edges. A hush fell as Lone Bear and Clara entered the circle. Clara's knees nearly buckled. She wasn't just a guest here now, she was the subject of the entire tribe's gaze. These people had endured hardship, war, drought. They didn't give trust easily. She knew that. She expected skepticism. But what she saw in their faces stunned her. Curiosity, yes, but also warmth, hope, and something else, relief. Lone Bear stood before the elders and spoke in Apache, his voice low but sure. Clara didn't understand every word, but she heard her name, or at least what they now called her, Tala, meaning wolf in their tongue. It had been given to her by an elder woman who'd watched her walk barefoot through thorns to gather firewood without complaint. "She doesn't whimper," the woman had said. "She survives." Lone Bear finished his words, then looked at Clara. Now it was her turn. She stepped forward, heart pounding. "I'm not Apache. I wasn't born here, and I haven't earned your trust. Not yet, but I will." Murmurs rose. She took a deep breath. "I won't pretend to be something I'm not. I've failed. I've wandered. I've broken promises, but I'm still here. And I'm still standing." Then she turned to Lone Bear. "I don't know if I'll ever be what you deserve, but I promise to try. To walk beside you, not behind. To raise any child we're given, like he or she belongs to something greater. And to remember the ones we've lost, not as curses, but as part of our story." Silence. Then one of the elders stood and said in English, "She speaks with scars, not lies. That is good." Another came forward with a woven blanket ceremonial, ancient, and placed it over their shoulders, binding them together. Lone Bear didn't kiss her. That wasn't their way. Instead, he pressed his forehead to hers, both of them holding the blanket's edge. It was more intimate than any kiss. The crowd erupted in cheers and drumbeats. Some women wept. Others sang softly, an old song of new beginnings. Clara stood tall, her face wet with tears, not of fear, but of release. This wasn't a transaction. This wasn't desperation wrapped in kindness. It was a marriage, real, public, sacred. Later that night, back at the lodge, Lone Bear sat by the fire as Clara folded the ceremonial blanket. "I didn't expect that," she said. "What?" "To feel wanted, not just by you, by all of them." "They were waiting," he said, "for someone to remind them that broken things can still be beautiful." Clara smiled faintly. "And you were waiting for someone to remind you that grief doesn't have to be your whole story." He looked up at her, eyes dark and soft. "Then maybe we saved each other." She crossed the lodge, sat beside him, and whispered, "Maybe we did." Clara had never truly belonged anywhere. Every town she'd passed through, every camp she'd tried to rest in, had treated her like a passing storm tolerated briefly, then chased off before the damage could start. But here, in the canyon where Lone Bear's people lived, she wasn't just tolerated. She was invited out, welcomed, expected. After the wedding ceremony, Clara awoke the next morning to a knock at the flap of the lodge. When she stepped outside, 3 women stood waiting for her, each holding baskets of herbs, roots, and folded cloth. They said little, but smiled warmly. Then one of them, the elder who had named her Tala, simply said, "Come." She followed. Without question, that day they taught her how to mash herbs into salves, how to grind corn into flour using stone slabs, and how to stir rabbit stew with wild onions until it tasted like comfort. The other women didn't make her feel like an outsider. They moved around her, including her in quiet gestures, passing her the bowl without being asked, showing her how to tie the braid on a woven blanket without making her feel foolish. It was the first time she'd ever been part of something without having to prove herself first. Children peeked from behind tents and trees as she worked. She saw the youngest, no older than 4, staring wide-eyed at her dress, her hair, her pale skin. Clara gave her a small smile and held out a bit of honeycomb from the basket beside her. The little girl crept forward, took it, then darted back, giggling. "She likes you," said one of the women. "I don't know anything about children," Clara admitted softly. "You remember how to be kind," the woman replied. "That's enough." Later, she helped mend torn leggings and stitch seams while the women sang soft songs in Apache. Clara didn't know the words, but the rhythm soothed her. At some point, she stopped thinking of the village as their home and started thinking of it as ours. That night, Clara returned to the lodge exhausted but peaceful. Lone Bear was there, feeding the fire, his eyes catching hers as she entered. "You worked hard," he said. She gave a tired laugh. "Your women work harder than any I've met. They had me washing roots and chasing chickens before breakfast." He smiled more with his eyes than his mouth. "You didn't run." "No," she said. "I didn't want to." She sat down across from him, her fingers stained with berries and earth. "You said they were waiting for someone like me." "Yes. Why?" He stirred the fire. "They saw what I saw. Someone who doesn't quit. Someone who survived more than once." She tilted her head. "You keep saying that like it's a good thing." "It is," he said quietly. "Survivors raise strong children." Clara went quiet, the words both warming and frightening her. "What if I can't?" she asked. "What if it doesn't happen?" He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Then we will still live, still build, still be whole." She breathed deeply. For the first time in years, she believed a future didn't have to depend on her body's ability to give life. Maybe she had already started giving life, just in another way. In the following weeks, Clara took part in every piece of tribal life. She learned to ride with the other women, her balance slowly returning. She helped care for the old, laughed with the young, and slept each night beneath the stars, feeling safe. The scarred places in her heart didn't vanish, but they softened. She began to dream again of having her own garden, of someday telling stories to her own children, of waking beside Lone Bear, not with fear, but with peace. One afternoon, Lone Bear took her to a rise overlooking the entire canyon. The sky was wide and painted with orange light. "This land," he said, "will belong to our child one day." Clara's breath caught. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she stepped forward, took his hand, and whispered, "Then let's make sure we're worthy of giving it." He nodded, not in command, but in agreement. Side by side, they stood. Not strangers, not saviors. Just two people who had every reason to give up on life and had chosen, instead, to start it again. It started with dust on the horizon. Clara was gathering berries near the edge of the village with two other women when she saw it, a lone rider, small at first, then growing larger with each beat of her heart. Something about the way the figure rode made her stomach twist, reckless, off balance. Not Apache. The others hadn't noticed yet, but Clara knew. She felt it. A shadow had found her. She dropped the basket and whispered, "He's not one of ours." By the time the rider reached the base of the canyon, Lone Bear was already there, calm, unmoving, flanked by two warriors. Clara crept closer, heart hammering in her chest until she could see the stranger's face. Her breath left her in a single, sharp gasp. It was Elijah, ragged hat, greasy hair, that same sneering mouth. The man who had once called her beautiful, then left her sobbing in a shack with a dying baby. The man who branded her with the word cursed. She staggered back. One of the women caught her arm. "You know him?" Clara nodded slowly. "Too well." Elijah dismounted with a cocky grin. Well, I heard a rumor a pale little gutter rat married herself a chief. Didn't believe it until now." Lone Bear didn't respond. He watched him like one watches a rattlesnake. Elijah gestured casually. "No need for the stares, boys. I'm just here to see an old flame. No trouble." Clara stepped forward, trembling. "What do you want?" He turned to her, flashing yellowed teeth. "You, or what you owe me. I owe you nothing." He smirked. "You think you get to rewrite your story just because some savage put a necklace on you? You're still mine. You were always mine." Lone Bear took a step forward. "I don't belong to anyone," Clara said firmly. Her voice cracked, but only a little. Elijah's smile twisted. "Don't flatter yourself, sweetheart. I just want." "What's mine?" "That stone around your neck, wasn't that from our boy?" Lone Bear's hand moved toward the knife at his belt. "Give it here," Elijah snarled, "and maybe I'll ride out of here without raising dust." Clara gripped the carved stone, the only thing that had ever honored her lost child. "No." "Wrong answer," Elijah growled. Stepping toward her, he didn't get far. Lone Bear's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Another step, and you'll never take another." Elijah froze, reading the deadly stillness in the Apache's posture. "You think you can keep her safe forever," he spat. "Women like her always run, or die." Lone Bear replied without anger, only truth. "She ran because of men like you. Now she stays because of men like me." Then he turned to Clara. "Do you want him gone?" Her mouth went dry. Every part of her wanted to hide, but not this time. "Yes," she said. "Now." Lone Bear nodded. He didn't yell. He didn't need to. A dozen warriors stepped out from the trees, silent and sudden. Elijah's eyes widened. He backed away, nearly tripping over his own reins. "You think she's clean now?" He spat at Lone Bear. "She's nothing. You'll see." "She's poison." Lone Bear didn't flinch. "She's fire. And you'll burn if you come again." With shaking hands, Elijah mounted his horse and turned. As he rode off, Clara felt her knees give out. She didn't collapse, though. Lone Bear caught her before she could fall. She clung to him, not like a woman seeking rescue, but like someone planting herself where no storm could rip her free. That night, the fire burned brighter than usual. The tribe gathered around it not in fear, but in unity. The elder who had once given Clara her Apache name stood and spoke. Once she came to us as one. Now she stands with many. A woman's strength is not in her blood, but in her choice, and she has chosen to stay. The others nodded, murmuring words of affirmation. Clara sat beside Lone Bear, her hand wrapped around the carved stone. She leaned toward him. What if he comes back? Lone Bear looked at her. Then he'll face us. Not just me, not just you, all of us. Clara blinked back tears. Because for the first time in her life, someone else would fight for her. She wasn't alone anymore, and neither was her past. The seasons shifted quietly in the canyon. Summer bled into autumn, and golden leaves danced across the wide valley like whispers of a softer future. Clara spent her days helping with harvests and weaving blankets, her fingers growing skilled, her movements confident. Her old life, the jellies, the hunger, the bruises, felt like it belonged to another woman entirely. But even now, with safety around her and love beside her, Clara carried one last wound that hadn't healed. She hadn't told Lone Bear. Not yet. Not about the midwife's warning, whispered in a filthy alley years ago. You'll be lucky to carry again. It haunted her, that phrase. No matter how strong she felt now, she feared her body was still broken. That the Apache had married her with hope in his heart, and she would only bring him disappointment. So, one evening, as the sun painted the canyon walls with streaks of fire, Clara sat with Lone Bear by the river and finally spoke. I might not be able to give you a child. He didn't turn to her right away. Just watched the water ripple past like he was listening to its voice instead of hers. I was told once, she said, forcing the words out, that after my baby died, something tore inside me. That it might never happen again. Now he looked at her. Is that why you've waited to tell me? She nodded, heart pounding. Lone Bear was silent for a long moment. Then he placed his large, warm hand over hers. I did not choose you because of what you could give me, he said quietly. I chose you because of who you already are. Her throat tightened. But you said your tribe needs an heir. Good. Needs a mother, he said. Not only for children, but for the wounded, the lonely, the lost. And you already are that. Tears welled in Clara's eyes. Not because she was sad, but because for the first time, she didn't feel broken anymore. Weeks passed. The air turned crisp, and Clara began to notice things. At first, it was small. Her appetite shifted. Her sleep deepened. Her stomach fluttered at certain smells. Then one morning, as she bent to stir the morning fire, the world tilted, and she collapsed to her knees, dizzy and breathless. The healer, an elder woman with a gaze like stone and hands like feathers, examined her quietly. Then she smiled soft and knowing. There is a life inside you, she said. A strong one. Clara stared at her, stunned. But I was told I couldn't. Then the one who told you was wrong, the healer said simply. The body is not a thing of rules. It is a thing of will. When Clara told Lone Bear, he didn't react with a shout or cry. He just gathered her in his arms, held her close and whispered, He already knows your voice. And she wept into his chest, tears of disbelief, of release, of overwhelming joy. News of the child spread like sunlight through the village. Women brought her bundles of herbs, woven toys, and gently used cradle boards. Men began crafting small boughs and carving protective charms from bone. The tribe didn't just expect this child. They welcomed it before it even arrived. But one gift stood apart. Late one evening, as Clara sorted cloth in the lodge, Lone Bear entered, carrying something wrapped in soft deer hide. He placed it gently in her lap. Inside was a new carving shaped like her child's stone necklace. but with two smaller ones entwined at the center. I want our child, he said, to always carry a piece of what saved me. She looked up at him, eyes full. You were never lost, he smiled. Not once I found you. Clara sat outside their lodge that night, her hands resting gently on the slight swell of her belly. Above her, stars spilled across the sky like thousands of silent watchers. She thought of the boy she'd lost. She whispered his name, and then she whispered to the one now inside her. You won't replace him, she said softly, but you'll heal the place where I thought nothing could grow again. From somewhere deeper in the village, the rhythmic beat of a drum began. Not loud, not wild, just a steady, grounding thump like a heartbeat, like life. Clara closed her eyes and listened, not just to the drum, but to the promise it carried. Winter came softly that year, like a blanket rather than a blade. Snow drifted down in quiet waves, coating the canyon in shimmering peace. And inside the warm walls of the Apache lodge, Clara groaned through a different storm, the storm of bringing life into the world. She was not alone. The medicine woman stayed beside her, chanting low, rubbing oils into Clara's belly. Other village women came and went, offering water, cloth, or silent strength. Outside the lodge, Lone Bear sat by the fire, unmoving, though the tension in his jaw told anyone watching that he was enduring every cry from within like a blade to his chest. Clara labored through the night, and into dawn. She gritted her teeth, thought of the alley where she once lost her firstborn, and swore this child would be born into warmth and light. At sunrise, a new cry pierced the air. And Lone Bear finally stood. She held the baby to her chest, weeping softly, overwhelmed by the weight of something so small and sacred. A boy, strong lungs, dark hair, fingers already curled into tiny fists. When Lone Bear entered, he went to his knees beside them. She looks like you, Clara whispered through tears. Lone Bear blinked. She? Clara laughed, exhausted. No, he, but still, your eyes. He reached out gently, running one finger down the child's brow. Our people will call him Coyote. One who arrives in the dawn. Clara looked up at him. What will we call him? Lone Bear looked at her. This woman who had once been a stranger in the dust, a girl with hollow eyes and trembling hands, and said, We'll call him ours. The naming ceremony was held 3 days later. The entire village gathered around the fire. Children chased each other between woven blankets while elders murmured blessings to the flame. Clara wore a white doeskin dress, embroidered by hand. Lone Bear stood tall beside her, pride etched into every line of his face. When they stepped forward with the child in her arms, silence fell. The tribal elder lifted her hands. This child, born of sorrow and fire, now walks into the circle of life with a name. May it carry him through every storm, and may his mother's strength live inside him. Clara stepped forward, voice trembling with emotion. I name him Micah, after the boy I lost, so both of them may walk this world. The crowd bowed their heads. No one asked her to forget. They simply made room in the story for both sons. As weeks passed, Clara moved through the village with Micah slung against her chest. The women no longer looked at her with guarded eyes. The men greeted her with respect. The children called her mother even when she wasn't theirs. And Lone Bear? He treated her not like a prize or a duty, but as the equal she had always been. One afternoon, Clara sat by the river, Micah cooing in her lap, and thought of the first time Lone Bear found her there muddy, starving, and afraid to hope. She whispered to her son, You weren't born because I was saved. I was saved so I could bring you here. Micah gurgled in reply, grabbing her finger with surprising strength. That night, under the stars, Lone Bear held them both and told her, Our story is only beginning. Clara believed him. because this time she wasn't a shadow or a burden or a forgotten woman with too many scars. She was a wife. She was a mother. And in the land of red stone and endless sky, she belonged. Forever.